I'd like to please welcome to the stage Michael Loft Mikkelsen, discussing the fascinating journey that LEGO had building up their management environment using Jamf. Michael.
Wow. Can anybody hear me? Everyone? Yeah, I think so. See if we can get this working. Yep, this. So, thank you for having me. Come here and show you what's happening at corporate IT at LEGO, and more specifically, what we have done in in the Mac project. LEGO is, at its core, an old-school manufacturing company. Like we produce a product, the LEGO brick, but we do that with the highest degree of integrity and quality. Corporate IT at LEGO is a service provider, and we have to do that with the same attention to quality and detail and ease of use to our customers, the employees at LEGO, as the product we produce, while also providing security and confidentiality and protection to our internal data and data for our partners. IT at LEGO covers a broad palette, from the end user targeted as Mac, PC, and Linux, mobile devices. We only allow iOS devices at this point, but they're handled or managed separately at this point. We do our intranet, lego.com, as some of you might have visited, meeting rooms and internal platforms to communicate and collaborate. So it's like any decent pool of enterprise offerings. Corporate, sorry, where the hell is this? There. The basic goal of IT at LEGO is to empower our colleagues to be as happy and productive as possible while they come to work and play in an empowering and inspiring environment. I mean, it's LEGO. At the same time, it's also about LEGO being as attractive a workplace as possible while we continue to attract very talented and amazing people. There it is. A little about my background. I entered the Mac community fairly late. In 2006, I bought my first Mac, the white MacBook, and I never looked back since. Back then, the Mac wasn't that common in Denmark, at least not outside of professional circles. I had to go actually on a day's journey to buy one. It sounds worse than it is. You can pretty much cover Denmark, top to bottom or coast to coast in 4 hours. So compared to ranges in US, it's not that much. Before I started at LEGO, I was an Apple Master Trainer, teaching and doing presentation in most of the Nordics. And before I even started doing IT, I was in emergency medicine and rescue and the armed forces. So like most Mac engineers, I don't have a textbook roadmap to where I got here. But I see that as a strength, because it fuels a different view in the technology and on the people that use it. Yes. What I'm going to do today is take you on a journey. The journey we and the Mac team, the Mac project, embarked upon 2 years ago. I'll give you a little insight in the decision process we went through to choose the management platform that would fit LEGO the most. I'll tell you a little about the hiccups we had on the way, and I'll present you with 3 specific solutions we as an enterprise had to address demands that we saw. And in the end, I'll send you off with the takeaways that we discovered in this process. So first, let me give you a short introduction to the LEGO Group. LEGO is a family-owned business based in Billund in Denmark. It's still owned by the founding family, now 3rd and 4th generation. It was founded in 1932, and at the end of 2015 employed 17,294 people, 4,200 of them in Billund in Denmark. Because we're a production company, our employees range the full skill sets, like from the factory workers that service the robots that produce the bricks, or that mold the bricks, to IT, to digital content developers, and to the designers that create the models. LEGO products are sold in more than 140 countries in the world. And the toy industry is very much driven by the announcement of new products. And in 2015, that accounted for more than 60% of that year's sales. LEGO is a single product company. We produce one thing, the LEGO brick. And we do that better than anyone else in the world. And what we do with this product is make all of these amazing products. And we do all of this because we have one overarching mission. And that mission is to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. That is our most single important goal. We're here for the kids, both big and small. And how do we achieve that goal? By making the coolest toy in the world. If you're children, you've probably met some of these products before. Many of you maybe have a Model of 2 somewhere. With this crowd, it's probably a Star Wars model. But to create these fantastic products, we need an IT infrastructure that is both agile and scalable and robust enough to keep up with our development and growth. So let me tell you a little about the Mac community, or the Mac environment at LEGO. We currently have around 700 Macs at LEGO. The biggest concentration is in Denmark, where our development and concept and product development is located. Then comes the US, UK, then Asia with Singapore, Shanghai, and Hong Kong, and the rest are scattered in sales offices around the world. So the Mac environment at LEGO is truly a global environment. The LEGO employees who use Mac are primarily either designers or developers, an amazingly creative group of people. They are, compared to our IT environment in general, not that many, but they're crucial in developing new products and solutions for LEGO customers. For them, it's not an option which platform they work on. Some of them come straight out of college. Some are recruited from the LEGO fan community. Most of them have been working on Macs their entire life. They're comfortable with it. They love it. For them, it's part of their identity. I'm either a Mac girl or I'm a Mac guy. The goal of the Mac project is to enable these colleagues to be as productive and inspired as possible. And we do that by providing them with a platform that fits them and their way of working, and not a platform where we decide how they should work. Before a Mac is handed over to an employee, it's integrated into the LEGO IT backend. We bind to AD. We do that to be able to utilize network resources. LEGO Web, our internet, network resources, network shares, and LEGO uses 802.1x certificates for authentication on network, both wireless and wired. So AD binding at this point is not an option. We use an ISO naming convention. If they don't fit that schema when binding to AD, they don't get a certificate that the authentication servers will accept. Every MacBook gets VPN, but we're not utilizing the native VPN client, so that has to be scripted and packaged and deployed as well, and automatic setup has to be created. Besides the setup of the Mac, they get our Office tool sets, and based on their requirements, they get either creative tools or developer tools, or in some cases, both. I want to give you a little background on where we were with the Mac at LEGO. The backend infrastructure of the old Mac platform was like this. In Denmark, in our data centers, we had one master server for the management tool. The management tool at that time had no MDM capabilities. It only did deployment of software and scripts. At the 4 largest hubs, we had booster servers. They then cached the software to deploy it, and the scripts that were used for setup of new Mac. The supporters, who next to doing support for Windows, telephone, mobile devices, AD, mail, and Mac, they used ARD to do support. But it was primarily used to enable VNC so they could go into the GUI and tick and untick boxes. They were really good at that. When a new Mac was ordered, it had to go by the hands of a supporter to go through a manual re-image, which involved target disk mode, Thunderbolt cables, and a golden triangle of managed preferences. We had single-job scripts and manually deployed profiles. It's enough to get anyone exhausted. It was very locked down and very we decide how you work. Not a workflow that aimed at the Apple experience in the 21st century. The process worked to most degrees, but it was unsustainable. As the Mac environment at LEGO grows, the Mac users naturally, and with good cause, demand to be perceived as equals. Like most enterprises that have Mac in their environment, the Mac is meeting resistance from the established IT organization. We are pushing against the old way mindset, where everything is locked down. You're not allowed to do anything, almost to the degree that you're not allowed to change your desktop picture. It's not uncommon to hear phrases like these. This has always been a problem on the Mac, or the Mac is just not enterprise ready. I think both of these used to be true, but not anymore. And it's a stigma that's very hard to lose. The Mac has always been compared to the PC, And it's not enough to prove the Mac just as capable as the PC, it has to surpass to be recognized. The backend at LEGO is PC-based, and it's designed for PC clients. And this causes issues, especially for older versions of OS X. So we'd analyzed all cases related to Mac during a 4-month period. Just to clarify, the last month of scope was the first month of the rollout. What we found is that 81% of all users that had a Mac reported issues. Bear in mind that these are the users who actually reported issues to our global service desk. This didn't tell us how many actually experienced issues. When we talked to some of the users that didn't report any issues, they usually responded, well, I'm an admin, so I either Google it or I ask a colleague, and then I fix it myself. So in this instance, being an admin actually made them more productive. One of their answers usually were also that I'd really prefer not to call IT. All in all, this was an eye-opener. So what were they actually reporting? The biggest cause of incidents were related to old versions of OS X. So issues that we knew would get resolved if they were just upgraded. The second biggest was related to network connection, to be able to get on LEGO network. At LEGO, people love their jobs. They want to be able to do their jobs. They want to be able to access resources they need to be able to perform their tasks. So if IT provides a way that's too cumbersome, people will find ways of working around that. In this instance, it was identified that the people with the network issues were actually connecting to the guest network, then activating VPN to access internal resources. All in all, to avoid calling service desk. So this is the most basic question as to why we even did all of this. I mean, why bother? Because it would help our colleagues in the business do their jobs. And in the end, it would free up resources for IT, both technical pressure, but also human resources, who would then be able to focus on developing better products, better solutions, instead of running around putting out fires. We don't have precise numbers until recently, but if we count licenses for the old platform, it looks like this. Before 2005, we had Macs at LEGO, but it was a very insignificant number. In 2005, we bought 200 licenses. They lasted until 2011, and then it grew steadily. In 2014, a year before I started at LEGO, there was a realization that with the amount of incidents that service desks were seeing, and with the kinds of incidents that they were seeing, and with the growth of the Mac community, or the Mac environment, we had to reevaluate our ways of working. So we had a realization. On the technical side, what we had wasn't what we identified as a truly enterprise solution. The main management server was located in Denmark, but it had no failover. And we experienced more and more that it had to be rebooted because it got unresponsive, and that caused a disruption for support every single time. The booster service ran on either Mac Mini servers or old deprecated X servers, which Apple end-of-lifed in 2011. But it was the only thing that was approved for our data center, so there you go. They did have failover. The failover was just in Denmark, so that put a strain on our network resources every single time. And the booster servers were all managed manually, so every single update had to be handled manually on every booster server. The management tool would constantly have the supporters disrupt or interrupt each other's work due to the way it operated. And that wasn't actually a bug, it was by design. With the Mac environment growing, it took too long for a Mac to be deployed or delivered to a new employee. And many times a new hire started, the Mac wouldn't actually be ready for them. The growing Mac population also meant that from the business side, demands were coming in from asset management to be able to rely on the data that they were seeing. And the business wanted to be able to access the same resources as the PC community. So time registration in Safari, a proper software catalog. I mean, to have the basic IT task available for them as everyone else, and not feeling left out in the cold or as a second-class citizen. On the human side, the supporters were not dedicated to Mac. Those who did contact Global Service Desk more often than not got in contact with the supporter who probably didn't know Mac or had very little knowledge of a Mac. And even if they did contact one who did, they didn't have a deep technical skill sets. So it added up to a realization that something had to be done. We identified 3 options. Like, number 1, we could live with what we had, maybe do a redesign and reinstall of the old platform. But that didn't address the fact that we really didn't feel like it lived up to what we wanted to do. It only did Apple device management, but it didn't do it with the mindset that Apple set forth for handling OS X or iOS devices. The main server was managed by the core service team with all of their bells and whistles, but the booster servers were all managed manually. Number 2, we found a solution that piggybacked on our existing PC infrastructure, meaning we only had to install a management layer. We didn't have to redesign our workflows. We could use all the same processes we'd spent years developing for the PC. And number 3, the last solution we looked at was a purely Apple device management platform. It solely did Apple devices, but their focus on doing that better than anyone else in the world appealed to us. We could relate to that. It was platform agnostic, so we could run it on whichever platform we wanted to. You might have guessed it, number 3 was Casper, or Jamf Pro, sorry. Everyone agreed that number 1 wasn't a solution. It wasn't a viable solution, at least. So we decided to focus on efforts on solution number 2 and number 3. So we had our contestants. Let's see how they fared against each other. We decided to make the most enlightened decision. We would run a full proof of concept. End-user solutions, my team, our team, has the responsibility of both platforms. Our competences are heavily skewed towards Windows, so it was imperative for everyone that this decision would be impartial. We accomplished this with this framework. Before we set out and started the proof of concept, we took a hard look at our requirements. We needed the solution that would fit Lego the best. So this was our framework. 13 categories, each with a subset of requirements. And it was very simple. Is there a fit? Yes, no, and not at the moment. Next step was to decide how to execute the proof of concept. We decided to have 2 fully functional test environments. We were able to do the install of the other solution ourselves, but for Casper, Jamf came on site with an integrator to do a full 2-day jumpstart. During the proof of concept, it was important for us to go and meet others who were using the product and see what they were doing. The drivers of the 2 test environments went out and engaged with the Mac community. And this was paramount for our decision, so that we could gain the confidence that we could do more ambitious than just chasing a solution that wasn't only an additional layer to our existing infrastructure. Because we saw we would be able to draw on the high engagement community surrounding Jamf. At the end of the proof of concept, the teams converged and demonstrated and evaluated the 2 solutions, their capabilities and shortcomings. We pretty much went into a room with the order of don't come out until you agree. And it was crucial that this was a team decision. And we needed everyone on board. And having our focus on security, the security officer had to sign off on it as well. Casper had some not yets, but all in all was the victor in this comparison. So that was the way we structured our technical decision. But we're also human. So the Mac responsible needed to be excited about the tools they would be working on. The PC responsible needed to be on board and support the direction. So we reached out to the community and engaged with them, just like you do now. And this step was paramount for our team. It gave us the confidence that we could do better and be more ambitious on behalf of our Lego users. Because even though that the alternative built on our current infrastructure, we also had to acknowledge that it built on entirely different principles and ideas, which are not compatible where we wanted to go for the Mac platform. So to sum up, our technical analysis and the human aspect both pointed in the same direction. For us to gain the full benefit and value, we had to choose Jamf. So we made our choice. Now we had to draw the lines in the sand. What were we going to do in the project? And more importantly, what weren't we going to do? We decided to go for a high availability clustered model. We set up 2 servers in the DMC on separate racks, because rack towers do fail on occasion. They in turn have a load balancer between them, between internal and external connections. All the Macs, both internally and externally, hit the same load balancer. A master JSS instance internally and a separate database server. Utilizing our existing infrastructure, we use that to deploy software inside the brick firewall. And this way we only had to deploy software to one DP, and LEGO IT Core Services would then do the replication of the software around the world. Externally, we use cloud services to deploy software for everyone not on LEGO network. We divided the rollout into 3 phases. Phase number 1. We would migrate the policies and workflows we created during the proof of concept into production and scale up the GSS to fit the model we had designed. The goal of the project is to streamline the Mac environment, and we also had we identified that we almost had every single major and minor version of OS X, ranging back from Tiger to Yosemite, with all the various issues they contain. Trust me, not a very wishful state to be in. After the project, we would only support OS X N-1. This would then provide us with a sliding window, which would ease pressure on support, eliminating many of the older versions and the issues they had, and we wouldn't re-image a new Mac to an older OS X version. LEGO is really heavy on creative tools, but because the Mac environment had been more or less abandoned by IT, mostly because there were so few, they were running a 3 to 4 year old version. That was only one part of the issue. The other was that due to licensing, we couldn't actually get an installer that worked on the latest version of OS X at this point. So because of our stand on imaging, we would also supply the business with the newest edition of the creative tools. But trust me, they weren't complaining about that. On the PC, we were upgrading our Office toolsets, so we would upgrade it on the Mac as well. We didn't want them to be left out in the cold again. So we upgraded that to the latest stable version. We'd done a beta rollout with a small department because we wanted, with the old management tool, because we wanted a stable baseline for when we did the migration into Casper. It was a very small department, and we had a supporter on site just in case. And it went horrible. The supporter had to help everyone at least once. It actually went so badly that it canceled the test. So we went back to the drawing board. We knew we had to do the migration anyway, so we wanted to test how it would go if we used Casper to both do an upgrade, migration, and update of the software. Again, same small department as before, had a supporter on site again, just in case, and this time everything was awesome, pretty much. The supporter was there on site, but he pretty much sat around, played with Lego bricks all day. But trust me, he wasn't complaining about that. Phase number 2 would see a full implementation of Casper. The software we had in the old management platform would get migrated or updated and deployed. Asset management would be automated, asset management sync would be automated, so we could start to rely on the data actually coming in. We used SCEP certificates for network authentication, but the networking team had notified us that in the foreseeable future, they would only allow 80 device certificates. So we would start to do the initial steps to do a migration, or to do a move from SCEP to 80 certificates instead. And because we use 802.1x on both wireless and wired, we did the preliminary steps, but implementing it would be a stage 3 or 4 delivery. At this point, it was deemed a nice to have. LEGO operates all over the world, including in high-risk areas. When an employee has to travel to one of these locations, they would have to physically show up in IT. A supporter would then activate or enable File Vault and then manually register the key. With Casper, we could centrally manage it, so every Mac would have File Vault enabled. We'd also identified the need to upgrade the skill set of Global Service Desk and to have a dedicated Mac team. There was what we call a Mac competency team that contained every supporter that had any support role towards the Mac. It had just been neglected. The responsible tried wherever he could, but attendance was low, and the cases brought up were almost never resolved. So we wanted to empower this small and, in our group, elite group of supporters. So in January, we purchased a training pass, and at this point, almost everyone has attended at least a CCT. And we also started to recruit supporters and consultants who knew Mac and who loved the Mac. Phase 3, Lego users are standard users. If they were developers, they would get an AD admin account they could use for authentication. But this solution had a lot of problems. They would get authentication failures if they weren't on Lego Network, and other user experience hurdles they had to traverse. Raise your hand if you've ever gotten the response, we don't want them to install stuff, right? Either that or we don't allow it on the PC, so we won't allow it on the Mac. Yeah. So the Mac project also wanted to challenge the aversion towards local admins. Phase 3 would also see all Macs enrolled into the JSS and the old platform decommissioned. So in our views, an ambitious but realistic plan. I want to show you some of the solutions that we have developed to accommodate Lego requirements and give you a little insight as to where we're going from here. With the choice of Casper for Mac management for Lego, we have no doubt we got the best tool available for Lego for Mac management. But we also know that with all choices, there's also an opt-out that you have to work around. One of them is patch management. With the lack of proper patch management, we decided to use what makes the JSS so amazing to do what we needed. We let ourselves be inspired by the community and developed upon that. I won't go too much into detail, but if you want a detailed walkthrough, please come see me afterwards. I'll be happy to show you. The benefits of this model is that when a new version is released, I only need to do minor changes, and then a version is uploaded, and everything kicks into action again. We develop scripts that can do a single app schema in the JSS in barely seconds. This can get very complicated. Our own Lego Mindstorms application consists of 2 editions, 3 content packs, and 13 different languages. It results in 23 smart groups and 73 self-service policies. But if you do a proper documentation and do a decent handover to support, they will be able to drive it forward. In Lego, we don't do user-initiated enrollment, but asset management still needs to be able to see who the owner of the Mac is, without support having to manually type it in. We wanted to automate as much as we possibly could. So to keep in processes already defined, we looked at how it was indicated on the PC. So when a user logs in 3 times, they get applied as a primary user. The difference from PC to Mac is, of course, how many times do you actually log out and in again? The first user who probably logs in 3 times is a supporter. So either one supporter gets very many Macs associated, or we have to do it another way. So what this does is when a user when a user logs in 3 times, they get asked the question, are you the primary user? Again, this solution is based on Casper elements with the minimum of complexity and in tune with the experience the user expects on a Mac. It leverages Casper Helper. If the user is a Lego employee and they select yes, they get added to the inventory of the JSS and it gets handed over to asset management. If they're an external consultant, Lego policy states that an external cannot be responsible for a Lego computer. So it does an LDAP lookup, finds the manager of this consultant, and he then gets added to the owner. We then have extension attributes that looks for last active user, and both of these records get handed over to asset management. With this, we can then finally start to trust the data coming into the JSS, and a supporter doesn't have to do anything. We believe the best about our colleagues, so if a user really is the primary user of this computer, we don't expect them to not own up to that. A goal of the project is also to enable DEP. But before we can do that, there are 2 security obstacles we need to address. Number 1, the Mac needs to be bound to AD to get a network certificate. But it needs access to Lego Network to be able to bind to AD. So it's a proverbial catch-22. The other is naming. If a Mac isn't named correctly when it gets bind, or when it gets added to the network, it won't get a network certificate that the authentication service will accept. So to mitigate these obstacles, we've employed a custom Deploy Studio plugin where we were able to give it the correct name and bind it to AD before a user is created. This way, we can then also indicate which type of Mac it is, designer, developer, or testing, and this then determines which software gets cached, but not installed. It's very important for us that the user can build their own setup. It's their Mac, they decide. Every good story has to have an enemy, and every journey has its pitfalls. We had an incident, let's just call it that. One February, one early morning, while we were still putting final touches on the workflow that the Mac should go through to enroll and upgrade, while I was on a plane between Denmark and UK, the root certificate used to sign the SCEP certificate expired. That was a fun voicemail to touch down to. What happens is that due to our high network security, when the root certificate expires, the SCEP certificate is no longer valid, and every Mac in Lego, both wireless and wired, got kicked off the network. Luckily, due to time references, the first to find out was Asia. The problem was that the SCEP certificate was manually installed during re-imaging, so we had no way of centrally managing it, not even if we had realized it in time. It was decided that we would update the SCEP profile and deploy it through the old management platform. Honestly, a decision I regret to this day. We could get the Mac connected through VPN because it used a separate certificate. We could then remove the old profile and push the new profile. People could get back to work, and everything was awesome. Ish. But you know what happens when you use an MDM tool to deploy a profile? That tool is now responsible for that profile. So now we had to remove the old profile before the Mac could get enrolled into the JSS. Because when we removed the agent of the old platform, it took the profile with it, with the certificate, and with the preferred network. So to give a better experience to our colleagues, we decided that everyone would get a new certificate. We would do the transition to 80 certificates in the same workflow. We decided that the certificate issue had to be resolved before we would continue the OS 10 upgrade. We would still upgrade the creative tools and the office tools, because if we didn't, the gap between collaborating colleagues would grow. We rescoped the rollout. We're very controlled with a small group of people. Everything worked. We then expanded the group and hit a snag. Reports started coming in that the new profile fails with different errors on different versions on different locations. So we had to do a lot of investigation and troubleshooting here. At this point, we reached out to Apple. And with their assistant and the assistant of Jamf support, we identified that there was an issue in how the JSS handles device certificate profiles. So the solution, a new profile. At this point, we were behind schedule. All of the designers were in a change freeze, so we couldn't change anything for them because they had to focus on upcoming products. It was decided that support would take ownership of the upgrade and do it manually. The Macs that had working profiles had been through enough, so they get to keep the profile they're on and will be upgraded in the cleanup in the end. Our persistence and efforts have paid off. We're now on track and entering the last sprint of the rollout, finishing up enrolling US and Asia. So, the moral of the story, or the takeaways I would like to pass on. Engage with the Mac community. See what works. Hear stories of what others are doing. It's important, especially if you're a small cog in a big machine, that you reach out and start the dialogue. This made a huge difference in our process. Make data-driven decisions. If you have a feeling that something is wrong, prove it. Nothing makes a more compelling argument than valid data. If you're not embarrassed the first time you do a survey, then you waited too long. And when you get the data, however shocking it is, take ownership. This is your chance to change it. Don't be afraid to be the guy that says something is wrong. Rather that than the guy that said, I knew something was wrong. And when you're considering solutions, it might very well be that a sales rep promises you gold and green meadows. I mean, they might say it will fit perfectly. They might say you almost don't have to do anything. They might say it's just a management layer. Alluring, right? Remember to be objective. Test and verify. Make your own decision. Nothing will ever fit perfectly. With this project, we knew we would have to dig in and work hard. But the solution that at the beginning, on paper, maybe didn't seem like the best fit, after testing and evaluation, truly was the best match for Lego. We highly recommend that you take your time and test before making your choice. Vendors have to acknowledge they are embracing where Apple is going. If vendors don't support core Apple technologies, like device enrollment program, if they don't comply with system integrity protection, if they're not actively engaging with Apple to provide support for profile payloads, then be very wary. Otherwise, you'll see yourself having to deal with a lot of technical baggage. And you need to navigate through that just to do the simplest tasks. And make sure you've identified the correct internal resources before issues arise, because they will. Is it an internal resource? Is it the vendor? Is it Apple? Make sure that when you hit a wall, you have a hotline to those resources, and make sure they commit. Otherwise, before you know it, you'll feel like you're in a very little boat on a very big ocean. In our case, both Apple Professional Services and Jamf Support really took ownership of the situation and went beyond to overcome the obstacles that we saw. So, before I go, we'll open up to a short Q&A. I'd like to thank Jamf for inviting me to come and share with you what we in the LEGO corporate IT are doing. And there's one thing that's important for me to make very clear. Everything we did in the Mac project, we did with one goal as a mark. We did to live up to the LEGO mission to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. Thank you for having me.